Yeah, it's been intense. I think it's been intense for us as part of the helping support the program, and also very intense for schools coming through the program. So we have seen a huge range of schools, from your small, very small rural schools who've got only a few members of staff, right through to large MATs coming through and applying for support. And what we do as part of the programme initially is understand the context of every single school or MAT that's coming through the programme. So it's important to us to get a picture of what their environment's like, what's important to them, where they're at the moment with regards to technology. So that paints a picture for us as part of the programme, so that we can then marry them up with the right demonstrators, but also for the demonstrators to understand the kind of the backstory, the kind of environment they're coming from. But there's definitely, obviously schools have been dragged, some of them dragged, I should say. Some of them are coming through the programme and they're actually very developed with their digital strategies, their engagement with technology within the school environment, and all they're really after is to kind of benchmark, because it's quite hard. Schools generally work in quite an isolated environment, and they just want to know, okay, are we doing the right thing? You know, are we approaching this in the right way? So we're getting quite a lot of that coming through. But in the main, particularly with primaries, it's very much we're getting a lot through the platform program. So they're coming on board with Microsoft or Google environments, and CPD, so staff training, understanding those applications. And for those of us in business who've been using them for quite a few years now, it's kind of second nature. But for schools, they're having to get their heads around, okay, what are the nuances? How is this going to work with our environment? And again, hooking that back into actually, what do we want as a school? What are we going to focus on? Because you can't do everything. You can't just adopt everything. So it's just bringing it back and focusing what's really important to our school, what we're going to focus on from a teaching and learning perspective, and how's the technology going to help that and deliver that. So what's been interesting is actually from a primary perspective, that mix of environments that we're starting to see now. So we are getting through the DfE platform program, we're getting a lot of schools going through the Google and Microsoft, but particularly for those environments that have early years settings, they have looked at the tools available and said, actually, you know, we need something else. We need something to fit that early years whole, because we don't feel this is really doing what we want to do for early years. And so they're going out and looking at other, so Seesaw, for example, Tapestry, Class Doja. So it's interesting that the maturity, it's almost like it's been sped up. You know, schools are having to think really quickly and thinking, you know, this isn't right. This isn't quite right for us. This isn't quite right for this year group. We're going to have to adapt. So that's really nice to see that they're doing that by themselves, and so they're coming to us and saying, we're trying to mix and match and kind of get a feel for how they can do that. Again, the whole area around resources, so understanding again how they can deliver the full curriculum through remote or blended learning. So if you're doing forest school, for example, how can I do that through using, you know, if we're all in lockdown, how can I still have that connection with the children in my class, which is really important. So that personal connection is key. Engagement is a huge one. So not just engagement of staff, which again links back to the CPD and is critical. You've got to bring your staff with you and have them trained up, but engagement with your pupils and also parents. And I think that goes back to Jonathan's point of the context and the digital divide and devices, and we can't assume that everyone's got a device. You've got to understand what's going on in your own school environment with regards to what your children have and your parents have access to. And I know a lot of schools are doing that, so they're kind of doing questionnaires, trying to understand the environment of what's going on at home. And another issue that's coming up now more frequently is how can we manage workload? So that's another topic that's huge. Like, you know, staff are really feeling the pressure now of this added complication of just COVID restrictions and like, okay, how can we manage this? How can, if we've got a couple of children out, how can we manage that situation? So there's a lot going on. Safeguarding again. This, technology is fantastic, but there actually comes, if we're all adults using it, we don't have to really think about the safeguarding aspect so much. But when you're in a school environment, safeguarding is a huge thing, and that's always at the back of senior leaders' mind, because they're responsible for what goes on. So you're constantly having to think, okay, is there a back door? Am I doing the right thing? Do I need the policy? So that's quite key. And I think for some it's a real blocker, so they'll immediately say, I'm not going to do that because from a safeguarding issue. So it's quite interesting seeing how within different school environments how risk averse some people are to certain tech from a safeguarding perspective. And another aspect that all schools are embracing and have to kind of get their heads around is SEND and how they support their SEND students. So that's another really important area that the program's been concentrating on, with some of our demonstrators producing some excellent CPD and webinars on assertive technologies and things like that to support schools to understand what are the tools that we can use to support our SEND pupils. So it's a real mixed bag from a requirements point of view, but also the types of schools that are coming through the program. So it's keeping everyone on its toes. But I think the key thing is for us predominantly, and I don't know if Jonathan would agree with this, but CPD is a huge aspect of what I think the demonstrator program at the moment is about. Really sort of there's that immediate need for schools. They feel like they kind of need to speak to somebody who knows what they're doing. They want to fill that gap and get going, and sort of those quick wins that we like to do, like focus in on what are the things you really want to learn to do, or the aspects you really want to do. Let's concentrate on that. And then our webinar programs, and they can go on and sort of learn about other aspects, but it's getting them up and running in whatever it is that they feel is important to them.
So it's almost I couldn't have done a better landscape view, I think, of the demonstrator program there. It's pick and mix, it's all sorts, it's almost an emergency response at times. Yeah,
definitely. That's how we feel the program's. That's what it's about, and I think the demonstrators would agree. We're kind of it just have to respond. Every week is slightly different. We have regional lockdowns going on. Government directives coming out about schools having a remote learning provision. So things are moving very, very quickly, and I think schools have been incredibly flexible when they had to. If you think actually. A vast majority of the schools probably were thinking, we talked about cloud computing years and years ago, and that's been banded about, and the schools have been told, it's great, you should be adopting it. And now suddenly in the space of 6 months, they're all pretty much on having to go through that process in a very short space of time. So that adoption, the usual sort of adoption cycle has been sped up. And that sort of left a bit of a gap, I guess, from a understanding CPD strategy point of view. So it's been really, really interesting, and we've just had to, and that's been the fun of the program, I think, having to adapt to the nuances that have come along each week.
So how do you go from emergency response at the one end to building longer term sustainable strategies within institutions? How does everybody become as digitally rich, capable as Wilberforce, for instance? What do we do? How do we do that?
I think it's interesting. So part of I know that the demonstrators, a lot of them are very committed to the schools they're supporting. So it's not just the short term, they're building communities for that long term support. Through the program, we've got a lot of webinars and series and resources that schools, school leaders can go to, teachers can go to and access that. But it is a long process, and I think it's exciting because I think schools are now digital is being pushed up the agenda. It's you can't ignore the fact you need a digital strategy. Where's this going forward? It's sort of plugging a hole at the moment because of COVID, but actually now what we're saying to schools as well is like, you know, this is here for the long term. You know, EdTech is here, is going to be embedded in your school, and you need to start thinking about, like Jonathan said, the digital skills. It doesn't matter whether in, you know, reception or in a college, you need to start building those digital skills so that when they get further up school, they can start using these amazing EdTechs and apps and things that are out there in a really interesting, make subjects really come alive, and I think that's really important. It's getting that message across that, you know, it is the digital skills for everybody, not just pupils, but also obviously staff as well, and understanding when it's appropriate, when the tech is appropriate, what kind of tech's appropriate, and just, yeah, so it comes second nature. And I think digital skills, along with obviously policies and staff training and all those bits, the puzzles, sort of the bits of the puzzle come together. I think, yeah.
I couldn't have thought or scripted a better advert for the programme, Heather, and some of the challenges that we're trying to rise to. And